Hey, what's up, guys? Thank you so much for joining. Woo! All right. This is a world first here webinar with Austin Griffith, Kevin, and Austin here. So I'm super excited for you guys to be here today. Um, Austin, I know you pretty well. You are influential in the Ethereum community, and we're really excited to have you today. I know when I first got started programming on Ethereum, like you were like kind of the guy to go to for learning. So, Austin, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the Ethereum space?
Yeah, for sure. So what's up? What's up? I'm Austin. Happy Bowtie Friday. I do a lot of thinking about and building towards you, developers getting into this space. I think about who's coming into the space. How do I make sure they have the right tools? How do I make sure they get the right education? And how do I get them, how do I speed run them to the point where they are getting employed or building their own products or helping to audit smart contracts? So that's my goal, is just bringing in developers and making sure they have what they need. And I got into this space. I was deep down a rabbit hole on Docker, learning infrastructure on code. So like redundancy and DevOps stuff is definitely something that is near and dear to my heart. So when I found smart contracts and I found this kind of like ultimate redundancy layer, right? Like every node on the network holds every smart contract. And when you interact with it, every node on the network updates, right? So this always on, unstoppable, permissionless, deployment, substrate of Ethereum really got me excited. And I started learning smart contracts and just fell in love with it, went down the rabbit hole on decentralization. And really, when you get into the space, you start learning that it's not just programming you need to know. You need to understand game theory and a little bit of economics and things that I don't know anything about, but you kind of have to learn about as you go. So I got into the space building games, but eventually found my place in the ecosystem by focusing on tutorials and educational content and developer tools. So that's what I'm here for. And I'm here to help folks get started and, get their journey going and get educated and start building things.
Yeah, I know when I first got started kind of in the space, I was, struggling to find like kind of a grasp on all the tools going on. There was like so many different options, and like I think eventually like I made my way to like Remix, which is, this kind of like browser IDE for Solidity. And it was cool because I could like do some stuff in browser, but like I really wanted to get my hands dirty and I just wanted to have this like full suite. And so eventually I landed on Scaffold-ETH, which, you designed Scaffold-ETH. And like it was just this like kind of like light bulb moment where I was like, oh, like I get it. Like we need to have, this up. We need to have the ABI plugged into my contract, into the front end. And like I really appreciated Scaffold-ETH because it really gave me that base entry to not have to worry about like all the tools and just to kind of get learning and start kind of tinkering with like how everything works together. So yeah, so thank you. That's really awesome. Is that kind of why you built Scaffold-ETH? Just because, it was like difficult to kind of set up an environment, or like, what was kind of like your motivation there?
Yeah, just like the 0 to 1 in terms of creating an app was a headache. I mean, it still is if you don't use Scaffold-ETH or some kind of starter kit. And I think a lot of people who see Scaffold-ETH say, whoa, there's a lot of stuff here. I'm going to start from scratch and learn. But really, you want to start learning by tinkering with Solidity and tinkering with smart contracts, and then kind of unroll the onion as you go. If you start from the outside of the onion, your focus will be on a lot of the unimportant things, and you'll trip over a lot of the things just trying to get a local environment set up. So the goal of Scaffold-ETH is, let's make it super easy. Let's get it so you get right into tinkering with Solidity and learning like what the heck is a smart contract and what can I build on Ethereum and what can't I build on Ethereum. And then you can dive into some of those other layers of the onion. But the goal was to have it so you could get straight to tinkering first and have an app that you could deploy quickly and basically prototype blockchain apps within an hour, right? If we sat down and started coding right now, we could get something done, right? But if you start from scratch, it's like takes days, right? Even like starting at a hackathon, any given hackathon, I would spend the first like 6 hours getting, the stack ready, right? And so the goal here is just like, let's get an environment that gets you to tinkering quickly, but also could be the launch point of a prototype or a hackathon build, instantaneously. Not instantaneously. It takes a while to pull down that repo. Other than pulling down and installing the repo, it's instantaneously. You've got a dApp, but you know how that goes.
Yeah. The question is, does React take longer to start, or does the repo take longer to pull?
both take a while. Yes.
Both take a while.
Yes. It's a lot.
Okay, that's great. So man, we're going to talk a little bit later about Growic, which is this kind of like online learning platform that has a Solidity track that has basically taken a lot of your curriculum that you built and obviously based the entire platform on Scaffold-ETH, which is this awesome toolkit that helps you get going quickly in prototype. But maybe it makes sense for you to give a little walkthrough of Scaffold-ETH for people that don't know it, or maybe they just want to kind of see how the magic works and how useful it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's go for it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I'm watching chat too, if there's any questions. But yeah, let's make sure. Hopefully I got my permissions right and we can share screen. Let's see. Is it going to let me do it? Oh yeah, here we go. Woo, some of this, a little bit of that, some of this. Yep, it comes with the territory.
I should have worn my bow tie today.
You should have. It's Friday, brother. All right, here we go. So we've got our smart contract here. I've gone through the setup. You can Google Scaffold-ETH. You'll find a repo. Basically, it's kind of repo-driven development here. Any branch or Scaffold-ETH itself, or many of the forks usually have a really good repo that will walk you through what you're about to learn. And you can basically just follow these steps. And there's some prerequisites here. Watch out for node versions. If you're running 22, you may end up getting something weird where hard hat's not quite ready yet. And also just leaning into hard hat a little bit. It's a fantastic tool and we use it for Scaffold-ETH, but possibly we may be even looking at Scaffold-ETH 2.0 with the Foundry version or something like that. So know that you'll have this sort of Scaffold-ETH experience going forward, whether we make a new one or whatever we do, but the experience is going to be very similar to what you see here. So I cloned it down, I cd change directory in, I yarn install, and I yarn chain, and that's what fires up this here. And this is your hard hat node. What's cool there is you can get some console logs from it, and we'll get that in a little bit. Then I cd into Scaffold-ETH and I yarn start, and that gives me my front end, right? So you kind of think of it, if we want to think of it like Web 2.0, we've kind of got the front end here and the back end here. And if you think of it like that, that's a pretty good mental model to start. It's not great because then you start using Ethereum like a database, and it's a very slow, expensive database. You'll learn how to attack kind of minimum viable decentralization as you go. And by the way, a lot of this is just to get you, the builder at home, context for even how to ask the right question. It's so complicated, and you'll end up asking a lot of weird questions because you don't quite understand it yet. This hopefully will help you discover some context and learn how to work through your own problems and kind of test your assumptions. So we've got our front end up, we've got our back end up, and then you do a yarn deploy. And what that does is it takes a template smart contract, it deploys it to our hard hat node, and then it injects it into the front end. Let's do that again. This time we're watching right here. Look at that. See how that contract updates? Look at this. I'm deploying a brand new contract each time, and it's giving me a new contract interface. I can do this over and over and over again. Here's one of the first gotchas to watch out for. If I don't have that reset there and I just do a yarn deploy, this isn't going to change because it's going to notice I haven't changed anything, and it's going to cache my contract. So let's just make sure to have that reset on there just to force that thing to deploy. So this is your local setup. This is what you should have. And this is really going to set you up to have a license to learn. You've got a contract, you've got the ability to compile and deploy it, and then you can tinker with it over here. So what does this contract have to start with? We've got a string here, and then we've got some function that lets us update that string. And it even has it emits an event, and it even console logs. So let's keep an eye for that. Okay, so I'm just going to say hello world here, and I'm going to trigger that. And what that does is it makes a transaction, it puts it into the mempool, it gets mined into a block, and then it makes that transaction, that effect on the contract. It calls this function, and we can even see here in the console log that my address, C3C there, set the purpose to hello world. Let's try that again. Hey, 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 right? And we can hit send, and we set the purpose. So the very, very first thing you want to dive into is learning about basically the syntax, right? The syntax of Solidity is going to be pretty easy if you're a coder. Hopefully you're a coder. You need to be able to code a little bit, I think, to be able to take this on. If you're just learning, you should probably hit some web dev tutorials, go to Free Code Camp, look for a JavaScript tutorial, build something that you will use like a to-do list and kind of sharpen your skills. Once you're there, though, you should be able to dive in and learn the syntax of Solidity really easily. And what I don't know if this is exactly how the Growic model works, but what I do is have you just head to Solidity by example and kind of take on some of these concepts. So just primitives and data types real quick. Here's the primitives you can use, right? Booleans, ints, addresses, pretty straightforward. We have a string here too. Let's go ahead and put in an address and see things change. So we'll do an address public. We'll call it owner and we'll set it equal to, let's grab this dude's address right here and paste it in there, right? And then look what happens when we deploy this contract. Oh, there we go. When we deploy this contract, we should get a new contract over here, and we should also see, oh yeah, there's this new owner now, okay? So primitives and data types, you're grabbing them, you're throwing them in here, and you're learning just kind of by example. You're just trying it, trial and error, and learning it, right? The next thing after primitives is probably the require statement. So if we, look at that, it already wants me to set it up, require that message.sender equals our owner, and let's even pay some extra gas to have a message that says not the owner, right? Okay, so now if we were in a traditional stack, you would write a big test suite for this. You'd dive into your tests and you'd say, okay, well, the owner is Alice, and we have Alice try to set the purpose and we make sure it works. And then we set up another user called Bob and we have Bob attack it and we make sure it doesn't work. And simply writing that test is going to take you the next 15 or 20 minutes. We're not going to do that. We're still we're not even sure we want to have this require statement here. So what we're doing here is we're just trying things out. We're just poking at things. So what we're going to do is we're going to test that this line works by just using the browser. So we have this owner. The owner should be able, let me make sure I deployed that. I can't even remember if I did. Let's deploy it one more time just in case. The owner should certainly be able to say hello world, right? And that works, okay? But now we're going to see the joy of burner wallets here. I'm going to open up an incognito window and I'm going to go to localhost 3000. And we're going to get a different account in the top right. See how this is kind of like purple guy and this is kind of like red guy, right? We'll have red guy be the bad guy. We'll grab some funds from the faucet and let's have red guy try to set this. And hopefully it tells us not the owner. Awesome. Okay, but pink guy still can, right? Pink guy question mark. Oh man, it keeps still in my cursor. I don't know what's going on there. And yeah, pink guy can. So we're able to prove using a quick burner wallet and some funds from the faucet that this require statement is doing what it needs to do out ahead of really writing a bunch of tests. And eventually, of course, you need to write tests and you really need to have a good test bank and it needs to test all the possible edge cases. But in this case, we're still learning. We're trying things. We're testing our assumptions. And the quickest way to do that is with a browser with an incognito window rather than a giant test, just to make sure this thing does what it needs to do, right? And that's just a little hint at how Scaffold-ETH works. We can build out a lot more and we can tinker with a lot more things. But let me pause there and just see where we can go from there, Kevin, and we can keep going. That was like my lightning fast Scaffold-ETH intro. Oh, maybe one thing I would add is this is an app that's on localhost, but we can change one thing in the app.jsx and we can yarn deploy it to whatever network we want. And this same app will work on another network and we can yarn build and yarn ship the app out also. So within a quick session of tinkering around, you could end up giving someone a URL to an app you've built that points to your contract on a public network. It's just a couple commands away. So know that as you're tinkering, getting something out there that someone can use is a few commands away. And it works just the same as it does on localhost. Sorry, there we go, Kevin. How's that for a good introduction so far into Scaffold-ETH?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was hoping, right? Is kind of just show how easy it is to get started in tinkering, right? You just run a couple commands, you've got this development environment up, and it's, the cool thing about it is, you're actually utilizing like all of these kind of industry standard tools, right? And like the way that Scaffold-ETH has been built is it's kind of built on this set of tools and set of standards that just make sense. Things like open Zeppelin contracts, right? Like if you're doing inheritance, or hard hat, which is kind of like the de facto way to run a chain, and React, which is, you know, just a great front end framework. And there's also a build of Next.js. There's also TypeScript support. I guess maybe that makes sense too, to talk about, you know, Scaffold-ETH actually has a bunch of branches too. So it's not even just the vanilla version of Scaffold-ETH. You can also do things like create an NFT app, or create you know, an ERC20 token, or a token vendor. There's all these different builds that are available, or branches that are available in that repository that allow you to do something different. And there's also different flavors, right? So if you want to, if you're more comfortable with Next.js, or you're more comfortable with maybe TypeScript, there's different builds available for that. So it really gives a lot of flexibility. So that's really awesome. So yeah, Austin, you mentioned a little bit about kind of like the journey that a user makes when they kind of like start learning Solidity. And one of those is they go to Solidity by example, or, you know, they start kind of like taking on some kind of curriculum. The cool thing about Growic is Growic actually utilizes that same model, but we actually do it a little bit more instructor-led. So we actually create these modules that are available. Let me share my screen and then show what that looks like. That way you can see. So if you come to Growic.com, right, you're going to be able to, when you first get to Growic, this is kind of like the page that you get. And when you first get here, there's a career track here, and then there's two different career tracks, but the one we're talking about today is the Solidity developer track. You can literally just apply as a student. All you have to do is connect your Google account real quickly, apply as a student. And then once you do that, your curriculum is going to show up here under My Programs. And what we've done is basically taken like kind of the recommendation that, you know, you've made in the past on kind of tinkering with different parts of Solidity. And we've built the curriculum on, well, first we do like a real basic introduction to blockchain, introduction to Ethereum, introduction to Solidity, which is actually a 1-hour session with myself. And I kind of teach you a little bit about kind of some of the basics, but then you dive right in. You start messing with primitive data types, right? You start messing with mappings, like how to build a mapping and a struct configuration, right, with maps and structs. And you go through these modules and you complete these. And so the first half of the course is you kind of learning Solidity, and then eventually you make your way to speedrun Ethereum. So, and we basically guide the student through creating these real world examples. So the first challenge you actually do is based off of speedrun Ethereum, and it's this concept of building an NFT. So you actually get to deploy an NFT. And the cool thing about it is that you actually, you submit your source code to Etherscan, and you also create a URL like Austin was saying that is publicly available that you can share with your friends. You can share it with recruiters. You can basically say like, hey, I went through this process and I created this app. And depending on how much work you put into it, how much customization, you know, you're able to make this stuff your own, right? And it gives you this great starting point of like building off of those things. So yeah, so check out Growic.com, go to the Solidity developer track, apply as a student. It's completely 100% free. And there's a handful of mentors like myself and other mentors that are really knowledgeable on Solidity and on Scaffold-ETH and ready to get you started. Yeah, so I guess I want to kind of bring it back a little bit, Austin. Like, what are your like kind of suggestions or kind of advice that you can give to like some students getting started with Solidity? Because I know, like for me, it was, you know, getting lost in the you know, the README files and stuff like that. What would you recommend that if someone's getting started, other than starting the Growic Solidity track? What's some advice you can give?
No, I think that curriculum that you've laid out is great. Like that's basically what I tell people. I say start with Scaffold-ETH, go through these concepts like you've done with primitives and data types, even before primitives and data types, maybe looking even at like global units, right? But kind of like get a lay for the land by just bringing up Scaffold-ETH, throwing these components into a smart contract, and then tinkering with the smart contract to see how it works. You've laid it out really well, going through each one of those concepts at first. The concepts are easy and you as a programmer should pick it up quickly. It's the next piece that I think is the most important for developer education, and that's building something that actually should be built on Ethereum, right? Like a lot of people will build, I'm going to build a social network, I'm going to build a Reddit clone on Ethereum, and that just doesn't make sense. It maybe makes sense for like a layer 3 kind of thing, but that's not even on a layer. It's not even going to work on a layer 2 when it's $1 a transaction, right? So I think that like there's a certain context you have to get for what is the right kind of thing to build and what are people building. And it's only after you kind of go through the syntax and then start building things that you learn, you know, the economics and game theory and all these other things are at play here. And what you're building is almost like a coordination mechanism between adversarial parties, right? That staking app is one of the most important ones. It shows how a smart contract's like a vending machine. It's like this state machine that's in the deposit state at first. And then there's some time period where after that time, anybody can poke it and turn it into either the success state or the withdraw state, depending on if you're able to collect enough. And that kind of leans in on even like a cron job, right? I think I love to talk through the idea of a cron job in Web 2 or in a traditional web protocol. You have these cron jobs that need to run, basically like these periodic tasks, maybe cleaning up logs or compounding interest or something like that. You need to run this thing every night. In a traditional web dev scenario, you basically spin up a server and have that thing check in, and then maybe spin up another server that checks in on that server to make sure it did its job or something along those lines. In Web3, everything is a transaction, and you have to actually poke things, and you have to actually build a smart contract correctly to make a cron job work. It's not just a service checking in. It's the combination of correct rules along with correct incentives, right? You need to build a smart contract that says someone can check in and run this service once every 24 hours, and anyone can poke it, and whoever pokes it gets paid to do so. So we write the rule that says only one person can check this only one time can this check in every 24 hours, and whoever checks in gets paid enough to make it worth their time. And by setting up the rules and the incentives, you create a cron job that runs periodically, just like in a traditional web environment. But in this case, this thing runs forever, and it's unstoppable, and it's permissionless, and it's decentralized, and it's censorship resistant, like all these cool properties that you get from decentralization. But you need to think of it differently. You need to change the mental model a little bit. You're not just running a service, you're actually, you know, creating the service, making it open source, and then incentivizing other folks to run it, and then making sure that your rules are written correctly in your smart contract that only allows the specific behavior that you're trying to incentivize.
Yeah, I think there's so much utility in the Ethereum, you know, as far as like writing smart contracts and building smart contracts. And there's a lot of things that they really do make sense. But you're right, it's, you know, Web3 is not going to be for everything, right? Building a smart contract for Reddit wouldn't really make sense because it would be super expensive, right? So yeah, that's great advice. Where do you think like you see the future of like Scaffold-ETH going? Is there any kind of like roadmap that you're planning on the product, or any kind of you know, new tools that you're kind of planning to implement or build around?
I think it's definitely, we want to make Scaffold-ETH less opinionated and more agnostic to different front ends. I think that we need to clean it up and just make it more simple, so there's not so much stuff there. Take all that stuff and put it into packages that can be added and removed as you want. Maybe some CLI that gives you a choose your own adventure of what you'd like to have and what you'd not like to have. I think that a Scaffold-ETH 2.0 probably looks something like Foundry with Rainbow Kit, with that contracts component that's so important in Scaffold-ETH, with burner wallets and a few other things. But can we have those burner wallets be an npm install, and can we have the contract object be an npm install? So instead of Scaffold-ETH being this repo you need to pull down, it's actually like these 4 commands you run, or these set of choose your own adventure commands that run on your behalf that sort of set you up with the environment you need with just what you want. But the first version of Scaffold-ETH was very opinionated and focused on look, we're just gonna we're gonna answer some of the questions for you instead of giving you the choose your own adventure. We're gonna say this is the right way to do it for now, but I could see a later version being less opinionated and being more agnostic. But at first we just needed the thing to work and the thing to do what it needs to do, and then I think other versions could be less opinionated eventually.
Awesome. Well, hey, I think we did a really good job of kind of covering Scaffold-ETH and, giving people on the call kind of an introduction of what they can do. I think the call to action for everyone is if you want to get more involved, check out Scaffold-ETH. You can do a quick Google search. It'll be the first link that you get when you search. And then if you want to sign up for Growic, I've pasted the link inside chat. Let me post it one more time. The Growic Solidity developer track is really going to be a great entry point. Like Austin said, it's going to cover all the bases for kind of a real base on Solidity, and then we're going to get you started on building your own projects, building your own resume, your own kind of set of applications that you've deployed. So Austin, it's been great today. Thanks so much for all of your insights and giving us that demo, and we really appreciate your time. So
yeah, of course. And to double down on that call to action, if you're just listening, you can Google Growic Solidity, and I think the first thing that comes up is that Solidity course, and you should be able to get into that call to action pretty quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for the next. So everyone, just so you guys know, the next cohort for that Solidity developer track starts on August 8th. So go now, register if you want to be part of it. There's a Discord channel, right, that you can join so that you can get some mentorship help. And yeah, we're going to be really excited because next week we're going to do the first session, which is kind of an introduction to blockchain, introduction to Ethereum. It's kind of a high level overview, and I'm going to do a full introduction to Scaffold-ETH. We're going to walk through and show how easy it is to tinker and build on Scaffold-ETH. And then you guys can, hit the ground running and start gliding through Solidity and then speed run Ethereum. So yeah, looking forward to it.
One thing I might add, as an extra, to help prepare you a little bit more, check out eth.build also. eth.build will take you through hash functions and key pairs, kind of just preparing you to have a more context. Here's just an example of a thing that makes a key pair, right? And to create an account on Ethereum, you basically just generate this big, it's really translates into a number, but this big hex string right here is your private key. And there's so many of these possible that someone could sit here and guess until the heat death of the universe and never guess yours. So to be able to create an account, you don't have to go to Wells Fargo and fill out something and get a bunch of checks done. And this is censorship resistant and permissionless. Anyone can create an account. Look at this. I'm creating accounts basically as fast as I can here, right? So this just shows how a key pair works. And eventually you can kind of use that key pair to sign and recover messages. And that's kind of the magic trick of these ECDSA key pairs. You can use them to encrypt and decrypt, but it's not nearly as useful in terms of this curve. So yeah, this can get you into even blockchain and what's the current block number on mainnet Ethereum, and okay, there it is right there, right? If we sit here for 15 seconds, we'll see that increment. But eth.build is just a good way to get you a little bit more context as you're heading in. There it incremented to 6.3. So just wanted to throw that out there. And speedrun Ethereum is an asynchronous way to do what you guys are talking about, but I think doing an instructor-led version of that curriculum is a really good idea, and I'm all for it. And I hope folks get through and enjoy it and like it and learn how to build on Ethereum.
Yeah. So I posted a link to the playlist for ETH build, which is
cool.
Austin's videos that he goes through, which the first one is my favorite. The WTF is ETH build, which I love that one. But they're just amazing, and they're really going to give you a grasp on the fundamentals of Ethereum. So if you guys go through that, you will be a lot further along as you need than you needed to. So definitely check that out. ETH build is just an awesome tool, and I can't believe that I didn't know about it until maybe 6 months ago. And now I'm oh, this is just so cool. You can build private keys and, interact with blockchain, put in a smart contract. There's just all this cool stuff you can do. And yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, so, when you go through the Growic platform, you still utilize speedrun Ethereum. You're still going to be submitting your builds through there. And so it does make sense to go to speedrunethereum.com as well to check out and see what the quests are going to be like. One difference is that Growic has this final project that we have you do where you get to build whatever you want. You get to build any kind of concept that maybe is like brewing around in your head and submit it. So that's kind of one little caveat that's a little different, but we still have you go through all of speedrunethereum.com, and that is a requirement for the course. So check it out. That's definitely a good call to action. So Austin, awesome. Good seeing you. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining today, and see you next time.
Some of that, some middle rolls. Yep. All right. Hearts, y'all.
See you
Good
guys.
luck. Go get them.
All right.